But if I were to say, my fellow citizens, that we shall soon...
When President John F. Kennedy declared in 1961 that the United States will put a man on the moon by the end of that decade, he rallied the nation to achieve a complex challenge that otherwise would have taken many decades. Kennedy's narrative was an example of what I call a future history. With vivid strokes, JFK described an ambitious yet attainable goal by a specific date. It captured public imagination and support, and as he said, it served to organize and measure the best of our energies and skills. Working backwards from Kennedy's future history, an extensive public-private partnership laid out the path to invent the future Kennedy envisioned. This included, in no small part, developing and integrating a host of new technologies and capabilities, such as in materials, propulsion, guidance, control, communications, and safety. Hi, I'm Chunk Amoy. I'm a futurist, innovation advisor, and co-author of A Brief History of a Perfect Future, inventing the world we can proudly leave our kids by 2050. In the next few minutes, I'll explore why it's critical to lean into innovation. I'll zero in on the transformation needed for our transportation and critical infrastructure sectors, but aim to offer ideas broadly applicable to all sectors. Today, the world finds itself with an even more daunting challenge than going to the moon, and that's the challenge of getting to net zero carbon emissions by 2050 in order to mitigate the worst damages of man-made climate change. Working back from the 2050 target allows us, as Kennedy did, to organize and measure the best of our energies to lay out the path to success. Here's some simple math when applied to transportation and related critical infrastructure. Transportation contributes about 16% of global carbon emissions. About 60 to 80% of that is due to light-duty gas-fueled vehicles like cars, buses, and trucks. So eliminating 10 to 12% of global emissions requires converting all light-duty vehicles to zero emissions by 2050. We already have viable electric vehicles to initiate that transition, and they're rapidly improving in quality and cost. The challenge will be scaling. At current rates, it takes 15 years to turn over the global fleet of vehicles. That means starting in 2035, 15 years before the 2050 deadline, all new vehicles will need to be EVs or better. And as a corollary, we'll need to stop making and selling gas engine cars by 2035. This simple math has earth-shattering market implications. Over the next decade or so, the worldwide market for EVs will go from roughly 4% in 2020 to near 100%. And just as significantly, the market for gas-powered cars will go to zero. Investors and the automotive industry are responding. Tesla, for example, is valued at more than the rest of the traditional automotive industry combined, even though its market share in 2020 was only just over 1% of global new car sales. Clearly, investors believe that the need to address climate change will drive massive growth for Tesla at the expense of traditional manufacturers. Now, in response, those manufacturers are also racing to focus on EVs rather than being left behind with just the rapidly shrinking demand for gas-powered cars. General Motors, for example, has announced it will launch 30 EVs by 2025 and will phase out the sale of all gas and diesel-powered cars by 2035. Ford and Jaguar will move to only sell EVs in Europe by 2030, and Volvo will completely stop selling gas-powered cars globally by 2030. Now, many forecasters are pessimistic about such lofty assumptions. But these same skeptics also never imagined that Tesla would be where it is at today, or that Elon Musk would be the richest person in the world as a result. That's because forecasters tend to extrapolate from today, and therefore have trouble seeing the exponential effects of what I call the laws of zero. These laws describe 7 key drivers in computing, communications, information, genomics, energy, water, and transportation that are enabling exponentially increasing capabilities and decreasing costs. The laws of zero, for example, are enabling smarter, better, and cheaper EVs at an accelerating pace because EVs are essentially big battery-powered computers on wheels. They're also driving the development of autonomous technology, which will further decrease costs and accelerate adoption. Now, government is a critical player on the supply and demand side of this transition. For example, in an executive order issued in December 2021, President Biden directed the federal government to use its scale and purchasing power to convert its current fleet of 600,000 cars and trucks to EVs. This includes, by 2027, only buying EVs for light-duty vehicles and moving to only EV acquisitions for all new vehicles by 2035. Working backwards from these very specific target dates, every federal agency must now organize and measure its energies around not only the purchase, but also the orderly deployment, operation, recharging, maintenance, and critical infrastructure to support the transformed fleet. More broadly, the math for getting to net zero in other major economic sectors, such as energy, agriculture, industry, and buildings, is also simple yet stark. Whether you're in the private sector or the public sector, your organization must examine how your purpose, mission, and strategies can best support the existential need to get to net zero by 2050. So what can you do today to get to where we need to be tomorrow? First, you can do as President Kennedy did, by writing your own future history. What does your organization need to accomplish by key milestone dates, such as 2050, 2035, 2027, all the way back to today? Second, determine how you can leverage the exponential capabilities and declining costs produced by the laws of zero. Third, use these narratives to organize and measure your strategies and programs, starting today, as part of our collective path to net zero. This is a challenge that, to paraphrase President Kennedy, we must be willing to accept, unwilling to postpone, and intend to succeed. I invite you to explore these ideas further in our book and to continue our conversation. Thank you.